Director of Planning and Economic Development for the City of Brockton. We are joined here with a team from the Planning Office, including John Fay, Evan Sears, and Duray Ali. I'd also like to recognize 4th Ward Councilor Susan Nicastro here. And it's been nice that she has been very involved with the whole planning process since its inception over a year ago. But we're excited to be at this spot right now after developing a community-based master plan. We've had several community meetings, and now we're trying to take that master plan and convert it into a zoning plan. So how do we ensure that what we see is the vision for the community is actually built there? Our current zoning ordinance is from the 1960s and is very antiquated. But if you're a haberdasher or a milliner, you're in luck. I guess we don't have milliners anymore. Haberdasher, you can kind of, but it needs to be modernized. It needs to come into compliance with the 21st century and with the new MBTA Communities Act that the state has initiated. So the master plan took that into consideration, and we have a lot of different building forms that we're looking at. And one of the things that we're doing is proposing a form-based code for the area, which is a little bit different from our usual code. The usual code says you can't do this, you can't do that, and blah, 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 and it's all a bunch of words. Form-based code is much more pictures and charts, and you can do this if you do that, and the districts control the uses and some general lot requirements, but the vast majority of your requirements are on your building type or building form, and that determines what your lot area is and your setbacks and how much you can build. So it allows developers and property owners a little bit more flexibility, but it allows the community a lot more control because we've established what the boundaries are. We've established how far and what kinds of amenities they need to have, and crenellation and all that other fun stuff. So we get a product that we're comfortable with, and the developers have some options and make it easier for them to develop. So with that, I would like to introduce Emily Ennis from Ennis Associates, excuse me. And she has been working with us for over a year now through the whole master planning process, and has been brought on to help us with this, translating this into zoning. So thank you very much for coming tonight. And Emily, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Rob. Good evening, everyone. It's nice to see some familiar faces from this planning process and some new ones. So what we're trying to do today is, as Rob said, we had worked on the neighborhood plan last year to try and figure out the vision from the community, what people wanted, where they wanted it, what that should look like. A lot of the recommendations are not zoning related. Some of them may take more time, but for the ones that are zoning related, frequently after you've done a neighborhood plan, the very next step is to do zoning. So what we're hoping to do tonight is tie what we learned in that planning process to the proposed zoning. And this is kind of if you think of it as a check-in, we've got some things we'd like to propose to you. Now, something like a form-based code, I'll explain that we're working in multiple districts. So really what we're looking for today is, did we get the areas right? Did we get the buildings right? Did we get the uses right? And how might we tailor a form-based code that's going to apply in multiple places in Brockton, tailor it specifically for Campello? So you can see all the people who have been involved over this planning process, which is, as Rob said, is well over a year. And I'm here, by the way, with my colleague Supriya Kalkar, also from Ennis Associates. So we've had a couple of meetings already, both for Campello in this process, but also citywide. So we've been working with a steering committee. That's pretty much mostly the people who are on the original steering committee. So we have a continuity of people who are involved with this. We had a citywide form-based code workshop just to introduce all 4 neighborhoods where we're talking about changes to the zoning to what a form-based code is. Go over that a little bit. We're here today, and then help yourself, and welcome. And what
Mark
we're going
has
to
a sign-in sheet if you would.
Oh yes, don't forget the sign-in sheet. And So in September, we're going to be coming back to the steering committee, reporting back to them what we learned today from those of you who are here. We're also going to go back to the citywide workshop and just show the details of the form-based code. And then after that, we will be going forward to City Council with a form-based code for downtown and for Campello. This is what you have right now. This is your zoning right now. You see there's a lot of yellow. There's some big broad stripes of red, both of which apply to Campello. It's not very targeted to what's on the ground. We find that existing zoning doesn't necessarily look at what is actually there, what's actually been built. In many New England neighborhoods, and Brockton is no exception, zoning came in actually after everything was developed. And so you'll get somebody building a house that's bigger than what the neighborhood already has. Well, that's because zoning allows them to do that, but that's not what's in the neighborhood now. So this allows us a couple of different opportunities as we go from a form-based code where you have these big stripes of color to something that is a little bit more what we call fine-grained. It's a little bit more precise on a parcel-by-parcel basis. And we can look at a broader neighborhood, this happens to be the downtown, and say, hey, you know what, there's some historic buildings here we don't want to change. There's a little bit of a neighborhood here that we don't want to change. Let's apply a different part of the zoning to those. And in the areas where we do want something to change, where there's a use that we don't like, let's apply the other part of the code to that. And so you've got that ability to really specifically tailor the code to your needs. So on June 13th, when we did the citywide workshop, we had a beginning presentation, and then we broke into the 4 different neighborhoods. So Campello was one of them. And we had 2 groups of people really talking about options. One group talked about the need to have a walkable neighborhood and thinking about it as a complete neighborhood with a good mix of residential and commercial buildings, multifamily housing, mixed-use building with apartments on top of ground floor retail, business offices, gas stations, small grocery store and a restaurant, highly walkable and robust neighborhood that has sidewalks and a bat stop. So the idea was people kind of built out their neighborhoods and then described them to us. The other one, actually I really love this one, a mixed-use building that had pediatric office and acting classes on the first floor. Owner resides above, parking lot is tucked in the back of the building, one-way vehicle entrances and exits, so you're not having to worry about the cars running into each other and into pedestrians. And then this was actually a team of students. They added walkways around the building for pedestrian safety and a lot of trees. And the benefit of a workshop like this, where we get people to kind of envision what they want, is then we can take that and we can try and apply those rules, the desires to the neighborhoods themselves. So you see the 4 areas that we're working with now. The Campello outline should be mostly familiar to you. We did expand it a little bit, and I'll show where. And this on the left-hand side is, your left-hand side, my right-hand side, is the map that came out of the planning process last year. So this map here, we talked about the idea of a mixed-use village center or neighborhood center where the historic village exists. We talked about a transit-oriented development near the station that could be higher density, more housing, some mixed uses, some public amenities. We talked about keeping the existing neighborhoods, the existing residential here with maybe some supporting commercial uses on the main street, but trying to keep those historic buildings the way they were. So remember I said we can use the form-based code to keep what's there as well as to change. And then moving a lot of the industrial uses, a lot of the heavier duty commercial uses that are less walkable down to the bottom where you see the purple, where there's already an industrial area that industrial uses could move to. There's already the Kmart Plaza we envisioned as being able to support some of the additional commercial uses, while the mixed-use neighborhood centers really reinforce. On the right-hand side for you, you can see the current zoning is that bright yellow and red that I mentioned already. So you've got, again, these broad stripes. And what we're wanting to talk to you today about is this is what we're going to show you today. So we've expanded it so that the residential here on the left-hand side is going to stay residential, not making any changes. There's a historic district in there. You can see the different colors change, and I'm going to explain those to you, and then you'll be able to come and see them up front here when we talk about it. But we're being more precise about the uses, about the dimensions, about the building types in the new zoning than we could be in the current zoning. So we want to walk these through, but this is an example of the type of thing you would see in a form-based code. So if you're familiar with existing zoning, you're going to get a lot of words that say, oh, you can do this, you can't do that, as Rob said. You'll get what's called a table of uses, and you'll actually see a table of uses here. And then you're going to get probably a chart of dimensional standards. It'll say the lot size is this, the setbacks are that, the height is this, maybe there's some other things. There's usually a ton of footnotes in there that says, well, this dimensional standard doesn't apply to this use, but it does apply to that use. And actually in this one, you have to look at 3 more footnotes, and then you've got a whole another section. What we do with the form-based code is it's far more illustrative. There are more pictures showing what's going on. So this, for example, this is a building type, which is a row house. You get a definition of a row house, you get the districts it's allowed in, you get pictures of what a row house is, other components that work with it, and then you get all the required dimensional standards for a row house right there.
In one spot.
In one spot, yes. Rob, by the way, Rob has been very specific about it being in one spot, just so you all know. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk a little bit today. I'm going to show you some images first, and then you'll see the same images here of different building types that are allowed in the different districts. And one of the things we want to hear from you is, do these make sense in Campello? They make sense in terms of the types of districts they are, but we have the ability to vary what is in each district by each area of the city. So I'm going to take you through some of these. So the first thing we have is our residential districts, and we're looking at what's called neighborhood residential here. We have a detached 1 unit, a duplex, and a detached 3 units. Those are the only building types that are allowed in the neighborhood residential. And so what's interesting about that, I'll let you speak in 1 second. What's interesting about that is in some cases the uses are very much tied to the building type. So you can see in neighborhood residential with 3 building types, we have residential as the use. Rob?
I was going to say, and one of the things we want to point out is that these are just examples. This is not saying all houses have to look like this, all duplexes look like this, everybody's got to build a triple decker. No,
Right.
It's just showing that this is a single family home. We're calling it single 1 unit now because everybody's got to be piecing. This is a duplex. A duplex can also be up and down. It can be back and forth. Triple decker is a form that we all know and love in New England, but it could be also something like this. It's been divided up into 3 units. So there's lots of flexibility in it. But this is just to kind of say, oh, I understand what this allowed in this district.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, that's absolutely correct. Aha, there was a method to your madness. So when you get here and you see row houses and you'll see the diagrams for what the lot looks like and what the buildings look like on the lot, you'll see that there are these variations of buildings so that you can have different forms of the building, but they're all a single unit or they're all a row house. All of that is in the zoning itself, and that's the thing that we're going to be showing at the next meeting is the much more detail of that. So, and before I go further, this light yellow here is where the neighborhood residential is proposed to be allowed within Campello. And again, you'll see it on here when you come up in a little while to look at it. So there's another residential district, which is the urban residential. You'll see we've got a couple of extra building types on here, but the key about this is that we're allowing the residential density to go up a little bit. So the first one you allowed 1, 2, 3 units on a property. Now we're up to about 6 units. We've been going up to, we've been talking about maybe it should be 4 to 8 rather than 4 to 6. So if you have thoughts on that, that would be really helpful. But again, you can see where the urban residential is. And those are just pictures of options. There are multiple ways of doing that. For example, you can see that row house is quite a contemporary style. You could certainly have a much more traditional looking row house. It's really about the definition of the building and just showing people that there are multiple options. Same thing with the multiplex. The historical conversion was really important for Campello because of the beautiful houses on South Street in that general area, maybe with the ability to convert them from 1 or 2 units to 3 or 4 units. That would allow some additional investment to come into those buildings. Many of them are quite large homes at a level that, you know, people don't live in homes as a single unit that much anymore. So the ability for an owner to convert, add some investment, bring them back to their historic roots is really important, especially in this area. So the mixed use district, and you can see we've got a couple of bits of mixed use right along Main Street here, and then down this is roughly where the Brewster ambulance is. So mixed use is that commercial on the ground floor, the residential above, the two support each other. And this is where really that idea of reinforcing the village, the walkable village area comes in, because with that mix of uses, you've got residents there sort of throughout the day who can help support the businesses. You see a couple of examples. The key for mixed use 1 is it's 3 to 4 stories. So you'll see 3 different mixed use districts, and the real difference is pretty much in the height. The uses are mostly the same, but and one of the things we want to hear from you is what height do you think is appropriate for this area. So this is all along Main Street for the mixed use 1. Mixed use 2 gets into those blocks between Main Street and Montello. So if you saw mixed use 1, which is on the side kind of closest to the existing houses, is that lower 3 to 4, because you've got 2.5-story houses, so it's not that much different. Mixed use 2, because it's primarily between Main Street and Montello. It's up in this area as you transition across the tracks and over to the other side. We can go a little bit higher. So mixed use 2 is 5 and 6 stories. And we've been talking about one way of thinking about these two districts is that maybe for mixed use 1, 3 is the base story, and if you give some incentives, we might go up to 4. Maybe for mixed use 2, 5 is the base story. If we get some public incentives, we might go up to 5. So we're going to talk to you a little bit about incentives as well. Rob.
I was going to say, one of the things that we're going to ask you this evening is about certain titles. This is a mixed uses, and we should add an S, district, because it allows 3 or 4 different building forms. So you can have an entire 100% residential condo building. You could have a mixed-use building where you have commercial on the first floor and residential above. You could have a completely commercial building, a bank or something like that. And then here we also add a lab building. So this is a little on the bioscience-y kind of stuff. But because this is a mixed-use building and this is a mixed-uses district, it's kind of close to each other. So is that going to be confusing for folks? Yeah. Thank you. No.
Yeah, and that's a good point. You can have on any given lot, you can have a mixed-use building that is 1 use on the ground floor, 1 use on the upper floors, maybe 2 if you have, in an earlier period, we might have had retail than office and residential. That's a little bit less common now just because of market considerations. For some of the deeper lots, especially in mixed 2 or mixed 3, you might have multiple buildings, and building number 1 might be a mixed-use building. Building number 2 might say be residential only, but the lot itself is mixed-use because you have that combination. Yes?
In the life of any one of these buildings, the economy is changing, use patterns change. So are you providing for conversions along the way?
Yeah, absolutely, yes.
Can I have another cookie?
Absolutely, yes.
Everybody can try.
And there's 3 different flavors, so you could just try all 3 and let us know which your favorite is, which is a good idea. I'm always happy for people to taste test both buildings and cookies. Yes?
For mixed-use building, what exact location that you can do it?
On
Main Street?
So you'll be able to come up and look specifically here, but just so you see here, so this is
It's the west side of Main Street.
west side of Main Street. Here's South Street here. Come down, so it's a light blue, and then a little bit on each of these sides here to support. Remember I said there was some neighborhood here that's not changing?
That
So
before past the Walgreen or?
Walgreen is in,
Yes, this is much further south of
That's
Walgreens.
much-
This is
yeah.
where Brewster Ambulance is, to give you an idea of how far south you are.
yeah,
And this is Keith Park right here.
yes.
And so this is like the Cod and down here to the Walgreens. And
I actually asked because I have a building for Walgreen.
Yes.
Which I bought for business, but it's just the business is not gonna sustain that building. I would like that, upstairs.
This would help you.
Yeah,
To maintain that, building, actually, I just bought it last year. I'm still waiting to see what I can do about it because I cannot maintain this with the business even then.
so when you come up, you can see, we've got an aerial here, you can show us exactly where it is, and we'll tell you where it falls within that.
Okay, I will zoom in and take this awesome.
Yep, okay,
Thank you.
absolutely. All right, so that's mixed use too, so remember 5 to 6
between
mixed use.
Main and Montello, and
Yeah.
along the tracks along Montello, and then getting closer to the station area, which is right over here.
I actually, before the Walgreen, actually.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
perfect.
you can definitely come and show us up on the map when we get done.
Appreciate it.
Yep,
Talking about the main street,
yes,
so what I can tell you, you have the idea to have in the west side, lower buildings than the east side.
exactly, exactly, and
Because it
that's,
backs up onto to single family and duplexes and triples.
Right.
So you don't want this enormous tower and blocking all the sun, so it goes up.
yeah, so if you think residential neighborhood,
Yeah.
west side, east side, and then, as I'll show you in a minute, as you get closer to the train station, there's just a pocket of taller buildings there. Again, further away from existing residential.
And I see that you have, sorry, I see you have there in that west side or even the east side, could be only apartment or you need to have a commercial space at
It could be
first?
only apartment,
I don't-
yeah.
Depending on your street type.
Oh, depending on your street type, yes, thank you, Rob.
No,
We weren't
because
going to do
I
street
say
types today, but
Main
yes,
Street got very commercial look.
yes,
Some stores.
So there's, as we get further into this minutia, there are what we call primary streets, secondary streets, and tertiary streets. So not only does that street type determine how wide your sidewalk has to be, but it also determines what kind of first floor uses.
I see.
yes.
And so a primary street needs to have at least 75% of the front as active uses. So an active is, it doesn't mean it all has to be retail, but it's, arts and entertainment, and it could be restaurants, it could be a whole bunch of different things. And then,
Commercial.
and then the smaller streets get smaller and smaller.
Does active mean you could have housing, family-wise, on Main Street?
Not in an active first floor. The back of the building could be.
Yes, that's where I was going to go with that. So say you had a
On the upper floor.
multifamily on Main Street, you would have to have the active components like the lobby, the common spaces, so that you've got people going in and out. On the front part, you could have residential on the ground floor in the back, which could be important for accessibility, for example, is to have those ground floor units. But the front, thank you, the front would have to be the active use.
So you could also have residential on the second floor on Main Street?
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely, yes. And that's part of supporting the businesses to have the residential on the upper floors. But you could also have commercial only. That is allowed. The key, as Rob said, the key on Main Street, especially in our village area, or primarily in our village area, that's going to be a primary street, and that will require the active use on the ground floor to keep that walkability, to keep the eyes on the street there.
So that would really come down to the owner of the building as to how he wants to use his building on Main Street. So he could have housing back, second, third floor,
Mhm.
if he chose to on Main
Yes.
Street.
Exactly,
That
yes.
sucks.
Well, you want the housing to support, well, we can talk about it further, but you do want housing to support the businesses. That's part of the reasoning behind that. But he could also have just a commercial building. So, that's also, he has that option, or she has that option for that matter. I don't see why the guy has to be the only one opening the building. So let me
Sorry,
move
I'm
on to,
distracted.
no, that's all right. So I mentioned closer to the train station, we would have MX3. MX3 in the downtown can go up quite high. So it starts at 7, it could go up to say 9, again with amenities. We're looking at this incentive structure where if you get extra height, the public gets something out of that. And there's a couple of different things we've been talking about. In addition to the physical amenities that you see today, or you will see today, we've also talked about the idea of affordable housing in some places. We've talked about green infrastructure in places. So there are possibilities we're still working on. But just know that one of our questions to you is, what's the upper height limit for this area near the train station? That makes sense in Campello. That is one of our questions for you as you come up and look at these.
How near to the train station?
Almost.
So that's the MBTA parking lot there,
Yeah,
and that's the area down to the Campello high rise.
yep. So right in here.
So it's right across the street from Keith Park.
Keith
A little bit
Park
south of Keith
is, yeah, Keith Park is right here. So it would not be right next to Keith Park. There's a buffer of buildings in between. That would be lower.
So where would East Market Street be in this?
East Market Street is, I
MX2.
believe, this one, and yeah, should be MX2. It's right around here, right? Yeah, because there's Market Street. So there's East Market Street.
Which puts it at what height?
3, 4, 5, 6.
5 or 6 stories?
Yes. Now,
Provided
just so
that-
you know that just because that is the maximum height, don't laugh, but the property owner has the option of choosing the height. For some of the districts, we do have a minimum height. We don't want a one-story building being built, a new one-story building being built in these areas. So there is a minimum height for some of these. But a property owner could choose to build something at either the minimum or the maximum height or in between. So, just keep that in mind. Yes, all other things being equal, they might want to go to the higher height because it brings more options for them, but there's not a requirement to. Yes.
Is this related at all to the MBTA's standards?
Yes.
On zoning all around Boston?
So yes and no, in that this was already started before those regulations were final. We started, I think, this process as they were still finalizing the regulations on it.
Yeah.
So we have done studies to find that and found that the zoning here should be compliant, but it's not the impetus for this zoning change. The impetus for the zoning change was actually, I think in
It's a
2018.
happy coincidence.
Yeah, so the city had already started a visioning process. I think the first report was 2018. And then the plan that we were working on last year came out of that visioning process. As I said, the regulations at the same time. So we've tested Campello would be compliant and contribute to the strategy, but that wasn't the main focus of this.
You're right on target.
Yeah. It was, as Rob said, it was a happy and fortuitous discontent. So we've got the buildings that go here. We want to hear the buildings for MX3. Again, would like to know height appropriateness for Campello because we can tailor this. Now, commercial district, and in some of the commercial districts, it also includes industrial. So we have the commercial business, and you can see down here is where we've got it, and a couple of ones there. That is your freestanding commercial, like the Dunkin' Donuts out here would qualify as a freestanding commercial. I think my colleague put a Starbucks up because we were being a little aspirational there, but Dunkin' would be one. Box building, grocery store, Vicenti's around the corner is a box building. Strip commerce, any strip mall that you see there, any strip retail. Those would all be the commercial district. Now note, many of these are car-oriented businesses, and that's why they're further down
Car-dependent.
Campello. What?
Car dependent.
Car-dependent, sorry. Car-dependent businesses. That's why they're further down, away from that walkable village core that we're trying to get to. Commercial industries, so you've already got it down at the very base of our district. But up here, because you notice I did the MX2 and I did the MX3. Now we're seeing this purple in the middle there. You've already got some industrial uses there, but remember that zoning is a 20 to 30 plus year, right? Once it's in place, it takes a while for things to change. Our question for you tonight, you'll see the sort of pinky purple color when you come up, is should that remain commercial industrial or should it be rezoned for something else? And when I say that, remember that if somebody already owns a property, they've got a use on there, if it's rezoned, they don't have to do anything with that. They can choose to do something. What?
I just want to jump in there. So
Yes.
this is Churchill Linen. This is the Trojan Industrial
Yes.
Commercial, what is it? Building materials disposal. They load stuff up onto trucks and ship it out of here. And then there's a plumbing supply over here. So that's on purpose.
Yes, yeah. So our question for you here is should commercial industrial be allowed going forward, or should it become something else? Again, you'll see when you get here the relationships of that versus the other zoning districts that we have
Changing
there.
the zoning does not mean that they have to leave.
Exactly, that's where I
It
was
just means
going.
in the future, if they chose to do something else, they could do something else.
Right. We can put language into the zoning that helps protect existing non-conforming that want to change, but maybe upgrade their facilities. So that's something we can talk about. So that is the last of the districts that are in here. We have, as I said, we've got all the pictures of the buildings. We also have the uses by type of district. In addition to thinking about the uses that should, or the buildings that should be allowed in these areas for Campello, we're interested in understanding which uses you think. So again, this is a selection of the uses that are in the zoning. Some of them are allowed, some of them are not allowed, some of them require special permits, so we're interested in your thoughts on those, if you agree or disagree with them. So that's activity number one. If you like it, there's a varying shades of green up here, and you can check off on the use. And if you don't like it, you can cross off with the varying shades of pink, because that's just what we have in the pin box. The other thing is we have the building types on the stickers, and you can put them either where the code is, or you can put them where you can see on the aerial, the ones that you like. If you don't like something, if you say, look, this doesn't belong here, just put it on the side and mark an X through it so we know that that's something, that you didn't forget about it, that you really didn't like it. But if you do like it, you know, you can either put it on the side and check, or you can put it in the area, whichever you prefer.
And
Yes.
We're not saying that they have to build this, that's just an
Yes.
example.
Yes.
It's not, all the buildings have to look like this, but it's to give you an idea of what a commercial building looks like, what a pad building or freestanding retail building looks like.
Right. Yeah, we wanted to give you a sense of the form and the height for most of them. Materials, ignore, form and height. We also have amenities. So as you may or may not know, it's always interesting when you have a brook that's kind of hidden away, who is aware that it's there and who isn't. We have French Brook, and it goes into the Salisbury Plain River. And down in the more industrial areas where it turns into Salisbury Plain and goes out there, we'd like to have some development standards there to help protect the river, the waters from stormwater runoff that might be picking things up. But the likelihood is there's not going to be a lot of public activity there. However, as we get to these areas where we've got them as mix 2 or mix 3, they're close to the train station, French Brook's a little bit more visible. We've got some amenities around the idea of opening up the brook, maybe having some seating next to it. That's consistent with downtown Montallo and Lovett also, who have waterways that we're trying to open up for public use and access through the zoning. You've also got some ideas that you can see here about seating areas, playgrounds, active uses. So we'd love your thoughts about whether or not over time you think these are appropriate amenities to have through new development as that happens. So we've got stickers for that. Same thing, place it in the general area, or if you don't like it, feel free to exit out or not put it on there. And so with that, I'm just going to, because I know sometimes people need to leave early, just let you know that our next meeting of the steering committee is September 11th. That will be at the library, and we will be reporting back on this to the steering committee members, so what you tell us today. And then September 17th, we're going to be presenting the entire form-based code, or at least introducing the entire form-based code for the downtown Trout Brook area and for Campello. And we're inviting all of the neighborhoods to that. So Montello and Lovett, who will be coming along later, can kind of get a sense of what we're proposing for here. And then we're heading for the city council approval process, but the different stages of that, September into October. So there's opportunity for public comment at that point as well.
Those meetings on September 11th and 17th, those at 6 o'clock also?
No, September 11th, the steering committees have been meeting during the day, so September 11th is 2 o'clock, and September 17th, 6 o'clock, and that is back at the North Middle School, the cafeteria there. Any other general questions before you come up and engage with the pieces here? Do we have a verdict on the cookie flavors? Good to know.
One more to try.
Okay. Susan?
Well, I've been steeped in traditional zoning for my whole career, which I guess is a long time. So I'm wondering, why is this better?
Mm-hmm.
And how do you go to someone who's owned a property or a business for many years and say, we're changing the zoning, we want residential here instead?
So, first question, form-based code has in general, one of the reasons people have been moving towards, two reasons people have been moving towards it. One is it's frequently easier to understand because of the illustrations. People can see, point to in communities where there might be a difference in language. You know, it's easier to point out the pictures and say, hey, this is what I'm trying to do. Does this make sense? It's often easier in the permitting process for you have, sometimes it's administrative review, sometimes it's planning board, sometimes it's ZBA. You've got the applicant and you've got the public. And having images is a great way for everybody in the room to understand what's being discussed, why it's being discussed, what are the implications. That can frequently be difficult to do with text, especially because most zoning language is written with a lot of heretofores and thereas and for so much as and all of the legal terms that are great as long as you're a lawyer, but really, really difficult if you're sitting in a room trying to parse out what's going on. So that's been one reason. The other reason, and then I'll hand it over to Rob, is that the focus on form is very much a focus on what is the experience of people walking down the street. So what we're trying to do is get to that physical experience of being in an area, controlling particularly what's going on in the front setback, if there is one, what's going on in the form of the building, thinking about the existing context and how new buildings fit in. There's a lot more control over that with form-based code, that it makes it a tool that can be very useful for established cities. You want to add anything?
Yes.
Please.
Before we started this whole process, we brought in the Collins Center at UMass Boston. And they're a urban affairs think tank. They're a consulting firm to municipal governments. And they did a study that showed that 80% of the city doesn't conform to our current zoning. So to go in and say, well, we're going to change your zoning, it's like, it's probably a good thing. And so what's nice is that there have been property owners involved in this thing. There have been business owners developed in this process of creating the master plan. So we've been meeting with the Campello Business Association, and we've had several public meetings where we've dealt with business owners and property owners. So they have been involved in the whole process. But getting back to this change in zoning, there's a lot of people who are going to come into compliance, and then there's going to be a whole bunch of people who are what we call aspirational zoning, and this is what the community would like to see sometime in the future. It doesn't mean it's going to happen tomorrow or within any of our tenures, but it's a possibility that it could, and this is because this is what the community decided that it wants to look like. This is the document that's going to guide them, guide development to try to conform with that vision. So it's been a fairly democratic process.
Based on what you just said, Rob, what the community wants it to look like, or what they might want it to look like, is there any real input per se by the community to have a say-so in how their community looks?
So
I understand what you're saying, what form-based coding is. There's a, we've got the clay models that we put on the table as to what, how, where, and why. But as far as what the actual input, what the community might need, where is that coming into play?
okay, let me break that up into two different pieces. And he was asking what kind of input, what kind of public input is involved with each and individual site as they get reused. And I think that to go into and have a committee decide each and every lot like they do in Cambridge is crazy.
Yeah, no,
It's very difficult. But because we had the 4 community meetings last year at South Middle School, and then our team took the show on the road, and we went to the Cape Verdean Festival, and we went to the Haitian Community Partners Back to School program, and we went to another one out in, I don't remember the name of the park.
Yeah, the business group too.
Yeah, and the business group. So and the seniors lunch. We've had a lot of opportunity for people to say what they would like to see, and that's reflected in the master plan or the neighborhood plan that we all agreed to as a committee, and now have taken it to the planning board, and it'll go to city council eventually. So what we're trying to do now is take that plan, and it's just a picture. This zoning is going to say, this is the frame for this picture, and these are where the lines are, and it's akin to paint by numbers, but we look at each lot individually and how does it fit into the broader picture. Now, we have a series of uses that could be in each one of those districts, in each one of those buildings, but we can't go down to we can say this would be allowed, this would not be allowed, but we can't go too far and say, okay, in your building I want you to build a health club, and in your building I want you to build a candy store, and in your building I want a public library. But all of those could be usable in there, and it's up to our office, Planning and Economic Development, to try to entice people to come in and do those sorts of things but we can't demand that they do those sorts of things. Oh, sorry.
And I mentioned at the beginning that the neighborhood plan had a lot of ideas in it from last year, but not all of them were zoning related. That's kind of the piece where this comes to play, what Rob just said about enticing people. The zoning can give the permissions. It can say it is possible to do this. It can, by the way it is structured and by the language in it, it can say these are the things that the city or the neighborhood is looking for. As Rob said, it can't mandate it. It can't tell somebody you have to change your property now. But additional work by the city to say, hey, you're interested in doing something. You know what? We allow that in Campello. We allow that in Montello. Have you considered those areas? That's the ongoing piece. The zoning sets the rules. It sets the framework. It sets the ability. It doesn't, it allows it to happen, it doesn't make it happen. That's the rest of the work that has to go on. So one of the reasons we're doing this now, before we go back to the steering committee, before we go back to the public and present it at this wider meeting, certainly before it goes to city council, is this is the kind of, did we get it right? Did we hear well enough during the neighborhood planning process that what we're showing you tonight in terms of zoning makes sense? Or do we have to make some changes, right? This isn't fixed at this moment. This is us asking you for your thoughts and opinions as we look forward to the next steps. Yes?
The governor is looking for more housing.
Yes.
Is there a proclivity towards more housing here than what is existing?
The mixed-use districts could allow more housing than is currently in existence, and that was part of the conversations last year around, especially around two particular things. One is creating that walkability in the upper part of Main Street within Campello. The eyes on the street, the support for local businesses, having more people around. We talked about making Main Street in particular, Montello a little bit less so, but as a destination for the neighborhoods. You know, this is already a really walkable area, but how to get more people to walk to Main Street because there are more things for them. And the other part of that was you do have a train station. The area around the train station is not at the highest use. If you know, part of the discussion last year, if you put more housing near the train station, that is close enough to the part of Main Street that we'd like to make walkable. It's walkable to that. More people there could again continue to support businesses. We did have a lot of conversation about supporting local businesses and allowing for entrepreneurship as well.
I was also going to say that since so much of the city is non-conforming, and large sections of Campello are non-conforming, that changing the zoning and allowing for new uses and for a slightly higher density will add value to those properties. So those property owners might be more incentivized. Thank you. You cited right. I'm sorry. So you incentivize development. And so we could see more development. We could see some of the old buildings that had 3 and 4 floors on them before that would have been torn down get rebuilt that way. Cape Cod Pizza had 2 floors on top of it that went away. M&M Fish Market had 3 more floors on top of that. And, you know, there was a fire and they destroyed it. But there's an opportunity now that if we get the zoning right, we would have a good fish store in the neighborhood and we would have some residential apartments to support the fish store and the fish store.
Because this is on the documents probably, but adding the mixed uses, some are 4 stories, 6 stories, close to the train station, maybe more. So there is in the zoning how these mixed uses are going to deal with the parking, because that will bring like a lot of parking needs by, let's say, all zoning or where. So how these mixed uses have to deal with parking is.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Oh, there are parking requirements, there are standards for where the parking goes.
I'm thinking
Yeah.
the 2 areas, I don't know if you match what's happening now, will be massive space needed for parking. So there is any.
So a couple things to think about, because that is a common question when we do these. So point number 1 is if you create a walkable district, if you create the opportunity for these smaller scale neighborhood service businesses, maybe supporting the grocery down the street, it's still all within walkable. People have to get into their car fewer times, right? Because they can walk to what they want. If they're commuting on the train, maybe you've got 1 car per household, not 2 cars per household. So walkable areas have a natural tendency to reduce car ownership. Having said that, you quite often get households where 1 person works over here and 1 person works over here, and maybe there's another adult in the household, the older child or a grandparent or whatever, and they're working over here, and none of them are on the train, right? So you do have to consider parking and where that would be. And we have parking requirements and parking standards and methods of sharing parking across uses. So frequently with a mixed-use building, the residential parking needs are not at the same time as the commercial parking needs. And so during the day, that parking is available for commercial. In the evening, it's available for residential. The zoning has ways of looking at that. So that's one. The other thing, and Rob alluded to it when he said, this won't happen all at once. I said this is a 20, 30-year thing. There's a lot more that goes into development than just the zoning. Again, the zoning sets the stage. It provides the permissions. You have what's on the ground now, who owns it, how valuable is it already. You have interest rates, which I know we've been hearing ad nauseum. You have construction costs, the availability and interest of a developer in an area, the availability of labor and the cost of labor, in addition to the cost of materials. All of these go into whether or not an area can be developed. And again, that gets back in some ways, there are some things that the city can control. Outreach, marketing, encouragement. City can't control interest costs. City can't control the cost of labor, the cost of materials. So we do get people, none of you have raised this, but I have been in communities where the concern is that the zoning is going to happen and there'll be a complete flooding of traffic and impacts. And in most cases, it's over a much longer period of time than people realize. Now, I will say that, and somebody will come along and knock on Rob's door tomorrow, but in general, it takes a lot longer than people think to turn, and sometimes it can be frustrating too. People say, we passed the zoning, why hasn't this happened? I just want you to all know that it doesn't always happen immediately, and that's important.
I have a question,
Yeah.
I guess for Rob and for Susan. Maybe I can get an answer. Eminent domain, is that something that, Rob, that your office or your powers to be could recommend in an area, or is that something that would have to come through you, Susan, over at City Hall, that would have to go to the City Council and the mayor? I mean, how?
So, yeah, all of the above. I was going to say, first of all, the city has powers of eminent domain generally for civic uses.
Okay.
Cities don't generally buy a car dealership and throw everybody out so that they can build, a casino or something stupid.
Right, no, that,
They could but it could be a school, it could be a police station, it could be, civic uses. The urban renewal powers that a redevelopment authority, the Brockton Redevelopment Authority has, if we were to create an urban renewal district down here, there are select opportunities where the development authority could exercise that power. But it requires having a strong development team, having a developer with deep pockets, because there's going to be lawsuits. The city isn't made of money, so we're not going to be able to front fund a development and then wait for somebody to pay us back. If something's going to happen like that, they're going to have to pay us right at the same time that we close. And it's a lot more difficult to go down that path. Massachusetts has just passed some new regulations that make creating an urban renewal district a nightmare. The state's environmental policy and the state's housing policy are at odds with each other. And so
something like the example of, is it the city or the state that wants to take over St. Elizabeth's, right?
It's the hospital, right?
Yes.
That's
Yeah.
the state.
that's the state's urban renewal authority because it's going to be using it for a civic use. Could use it for a civic use, but fortunately the state's not coming down here to do anything yet. Well, I mean, if there's maybe Good Samaritan, I don't know. But they're not going to take Cape Cod Pizza to turn it into something.
Yeah, no, I'm just trying to get a better
I
understanding
don't know.
of what,
Sure.
what could take place what could take place
And to be honest, sometimes we need that stick to make things happen. You know, examples of people who bought buildings 30, 40, 50 years ago, they've paid it off. There's nobody in the building. They're just, you know, taking it as a tax loss. We can't afford that as a community. And so we might need to step up and do something. And when I mean we, I mean the redevelopment authority, we. Kind of wearing two hats at the moment, as opposed to the city doing it. But sometimes you need to give people a push.
So if I'm understanding you correctly, the redevelopment authority could turn to, say, Susan, city council, and say, this property right here could make this entire community a better community if it were to be functioning in that manner for the community, instead of just sitting here and not doing jack shit for the time being. So if you felt compelled to do so.
Probably can't hear, I'm sorry. But could the city do that? Could the city step in and take a property or the redevelopment authority, if it was the impetus for new development, and we would have to create an urban renewal district, and that's going to take 3 or 4 years, and it takes at least $250,000 to $300,000 now. It used to be a simple environmental review, and now it's full pay for engineers and lawyers. Just kidding. But it's gotten very, very difficult. So we're not proposing an urban renewal district here. I wanted to propose one, but we don't have that kind of money or time. But if we can get the zoning right, the market will straighten itself out shortly. Interest rates will come down. We'll see people wanting to develop again. It's good that we're doing all this planning now while things aren't being built, so that we're not ending up with something that we don't want there. So we'll be ready when the market turns around. So this is a perfect opportunity for us. And let's go into the
Yes,
exercises.
I was going to say. So we're going to be here, happy to answer more questions, but I'm just looking at the time, and I want to make sure everybody has a chance to come up and actually interact with the materials. So come on up, help yourself to more water and cookies. So buildings and amenities, current zoning, what's on the ground, and then the uses over here.